These unprecedented times that we are going through right now are forcing us to make a choice. They're forcing us to decide if humans should be controlled or free. And the reason that fundamental choice, which really underlies everything that's happening right now, in regards to all the craziness in the world, COVID and riots and food issues and weather and everything else, the reason why that decision is fundamental to everything is because there's a lot of fear in the world right now. Legitimate or not, I think a lot of it is not if we have a different understanding of humanity and of nature. But given the understanding that people have, they're afraid. There's a lot of fear. And fear is the tool of control seekers. So control seekers love to capitalize on fear. They look for fear, they capitalize on fear, and they create fear to the extent that they can. Because your freedom, your willingness to give up your freedom begins where your fear begins. Or your freedom is lost where your fear begins. So fear is fantastic for them, and there's so much happening right now. I'm not really a conspiracy theorist, but things happen and people take advantage of them, and they, coagulate and turn them into bigger things. So there's so much right now. It's so ripe for opportunity for the control seekers. You have a virus that we're claiming is new. That gets into the theory of how viruses work. But anyway, a new virus. You have cultural and civil unrest. We're in a grand solar minimum, which historically has caused dramatic weather pattern changes. And we're probably seeing some of that right now. It's hard to tell when you're in it. In hindsight, it's always easier to tell. But, there's a lot of things that are happening right now that it's very, very easy for people to fall into fear about. And it's very easy for control seekers to use those as legitimate reasons to control people. And the control seekers are prepared, and they are very clear about what they want to accomplish. They want to track everything about everyone all the time. They want total control over the food supply so that we don't ever run out of it, theoretically, or so that we can control it. We can decide who gets it and when and under what circumstances. We have things going on at all levels, so like the Green New Deal, the Farm to Fork European Green Deal. These are big national and even global things. They're trying to be global, that are going on, but we also have stuff going on in our communities, decisions about local decisions about, schools and masks and just laws and regulations about anything, you name it, raw foods and people's freedom to keep chickens and farming, whether or not people can farm and what they have to do to farm, and the kinds of regulations that we hold farmers to can wipe out entire segments of the farming community. And even supply chain is a big word right now. If we think we need global control over the supply chain, so we need to track everything in it meticulously down to every last bean that's part of the farm to fork thing that accomplishes two things at one time. It's green and it controls the supply chain. So the control seekers have been working on these things for a long time, and they're always just waiting for opportunities to say, we need them. We have to have it now, and I'm going to foist it upon you right now, and you're too afraid to fight back. The only way, it's coming to a head right now, and that's a very, very good thing, because it's going to force the people on the side of freedom, the people who believe in the goodness of humanity, the people who know that we can be free and still put a handful of laws in place that prevent us from harming others, but otherwise leave people free. It's going to force us to get clarity on, are we on that side? Do we stand on that side? What does it mean to stand on that side? And what are we going to do about it? Because otherwise, our freedoms are going to be just drastically lost in the near future. And so this is good. We need to get this clarity and crystallization on the side of pro-freedom people. There will always be debates about exactly where to draw a line, what constitutes an infringement on another's right on really complex issues. And but that's not fundamentally what it's about, because we can have civil debates about that, and you can, implement different things in different places and find out what works and things like that. But fundamentally, it's about, do you fundamentally believe that humans should be free, or should they be controlled? And the argument, so to speak, from nature is very, very clear on this. Nature as a whole will persist infinitely. As long as there is Earth to be on, nature will persist, and maybe beyond Earth, but my scope is Earth. So as long as the Earth is here, nature will persist no matter what humans do. Humans are not capable of wiping out every gram of nature and still remaining, because we are a part of nature. So we would wipe out ourselves before all of nature would go, and it would rebound. But the reason that nature's time is infinite is because it's free. Nature has, I refer to this all the time, Adrienne Bijan defines life as movement with the freedom to change. So nature has the freedom to change, and that's what it does exceptionally well. The defining characteristic of nature is evolution. And I don't mean, the debate about the theory of evolution and Darwin and all that kind of stuff. I mean just change. You can see change happening all the time. A plant changes as it grows. It can change direction and change texture, and everything changes. It evolves continuously. A river can change as more water comes down a mountain, and just everything can change. It has that freedom. And when things get into such a niche that they can no longer change, they usually become extinct. They do become extinct eventually. But nature as a whole will never be extinct, because its pieces can change. And so that freedom to change leads to all the complexity and diversity that allows life to continue on no matter what. There's always a way to accomplish the movement of energy that needs to be accomplished for life to happen when you have so much complexity and so much diversity. Complexity doesn't mean complicated. Complexity means so many things interwoven together. There can be 9 different ways to get to this energy path, to get to this flow of energy. So the more freedom and thus complexity and diversity that things have in nature, that ecosystems and species and everything else in nature has, the longer they persist. And humans are a part of nature and are in that same boat. The more that we restrict the freedoms of humanity, the less time that we will persist. We'll just wipe ourselves out because we can't respond energetically to things that need to happen. one example is with food, where both sides honestly keep trying to reduce our freedom around food. So people who want clean food, as in made in a manufacturing facility instead of on a farm, traceable food and controlled food, reliable food, want to get that at the expense of the small farms, the regenerative agriculture, things like that. So they're pitting themselves against each other. And the small farms, frankly, want to forcibly eliminate, big farms and artificial food and things like that. In either case, we're restricting our freedom and not allowing the things to come into being that need to come into being to fulfill humanity. And that will limit our time here. In nature, you have few large and many small. That's a fundamental rule of nature. You'll have, in a forest, comparatively speaking, you'll have few large trees and gazillions of smaller trees and plants. And that rule applies to everything. Rivers and rivulets, you have, a few great big channels and then tons and tons of little ones. You have all the structures in our body, our lungs and our brain and everything else has a few large pathways and tons of small ones. And we need that same thing in our food system. There could be an argument for large-scale farms for wheat and things like that, done well, done right. But most of the farming would be small and local, and that would follow the rules of nature. And if you just leave humans free, that will happen naturally because we are a part of nature. It will just happen. And we will go down the path of regenerative agriculture without being forced because it works. And where we're struggling to produce enough, we'll either get better at that or we'll have those areas that are some other type of food. And that's fine as long as we're not forced into either system. So we need to get extreme clarity. Those of us on the side of freedom need to get extreme clarity about what does it mean to be free? What does it mean to be human? Is it okay to be human and free? We have to get our head around that does not make us horribly destructive beings. We're a part of nature, just like everything else. We're going to create as much flow as possible when we're free, just like everything else in nature. So we're going to have to get clarity around these issues, because if we don't, the control seekers will just automatically win. And if we do, they can't win. I really, really, truly, firmly believe that they cannot win. The beauty always prevails, and beauty is flow. Beauty is freedom. Beauty is when all the energy can move, when it's released and can move through the system. And beauty will prevail because everything is designed to seek that. Unless you mess with that. The humans have the problem of the mind being young and insecure and thinking it has to fight against nature. And so we start messing with it, and then it doesn't work so well. But when we work with nature, when we allow our mind to be a part of human and a part of nature, we will go down the same path as everything else in nature, which is creating as much flow as possible.